The crystal wine glass exploded against the wall 6 inches from a child's face. The entire restaurant froze. 50 people, dead silent. Not a fork moved. A 6-year-old boy sat paralyzed in his chair, shards of glass glittering in his dark curls, his small hands trembling. A drunk man twice his size was leaning over him, screaming, spit flying, one thick hand gripping the boy's arm hard enough to leave bruises. And then a waitress, a 23-year-old single mother earning $9 an hour, did something that 12 armed professionals in that room did not do. She threw her body over that child like a human shield. Glass cut her face. She didn't flinch. The drunk screamed at her. She didn't move. She wrapped that boy in her arms and whispered, "I've got you. You're safe." I promise. She had no idea that the boy's father was sitting 15 feet away, watching the whole thing, and she had absolutely no idea that the man now rising from his chair, slowly, silently, with a calm that comes right before devastation, was Dominic Valente, the most powerful and feared man on the entire eastern seaboard. But here's what will really shock you. This was not the first time this waitress had protected his son. And when Dominic discovers what she had been secretly doing for weeks, it broke something inside of him that he thought could never be broken again. Stay with me to the very end. I promise you, you are not ready for how this ends. But real quick before we dive in, if you love stories like this, smash that subscribe button, tap the like, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now, let's get into it. Friday evening, late October, Manhattan dressed in gold, the air carrying that first sharp bite of autumn. On the corner of East 78th and Madison sat a restaurant called Luca's. Elegant but understated. Warm amber light behind heavy curtains, a brass-handled door, a small engraved sign, no velvet ropes, nothing trying too hard. On paper, Luca's belonged to a retired Neapolitan chef named Giancarlo Bianchi. But everyone who mattered understood the truth. Luca's was Dominic Valente's territory. You didn't cause trouble here. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't snap your fingers at the staff. And you never, ever disrespected anyone under that roof, because the consequences didn't come with warnings. They just came. Tonight, the dining room glowed. 52 seats, 48 occupied. Met candlelight against white linen. Truffle risotto and slow-braised ossobuco drifting through the air. And in the far corner, behind a carved wooden partition, sat the man who owned it all. But what nobody knew, what even his security didn't know, was that tonight, Dominic Valente was about to discover something about a waitress that would shake him to his core. And it had nothing to do with what she was about to do. It had to do with what she had already been doing, secretly, for weeks. Dominic Valente was 51, 6'2", broad shoulders filling a charcoal Brioni suit without a wrinkle, dark hair threaded with silver at the temples, angular face, deep-set eyes the color of black coffee, the kind of eyes that made grown men look away. He controlled shipping routes from Newark to Boston. He had connections in City Hall, Court, and at least 4 Fortune 500 boardrooms. He never raised his voice. He never repeated himself. When Dominic Valente spoke, you listened the first time, or you didn't get a second chance. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, he was just a father having dinner with his son. Marco Valente was 6 years old, a tornado in a tiny suit jacket, dark curls, wide brown eyes, restless energy that made every adult around him either smile or brace for impact. He was the only person on earth who could make Dominic Valente smile without trying. 2 years ago, Marco's mother, Elena, had died in a car accident. Not an enemy hit, A patch of black ice and an exhausted truck driver. Random, senseless. The kind of tragedy that money and power are completely useless against. Since that night, Fridays had been the hardest. Well, Friday was Elena's night. She used to take Marco for ice cream every Friday. When she died, Fridays became the night he cried the most. Tonight, Dominic wanted something normal. Just pasta and garlic bread. Father and son. He'd told security to stay close but invisible. 2 at the bar, 2 outside, Sal near the door. He didn't know that before dessert arrived, his entire world would crack open because of a waitress he'd never spoken to. Their server was Clara Reese, 23, auburn hair, tight ponytail, constellation of freckles, dark circles hidden under drugstore concealer, standard uniform, slightly wrinkled, small stain on the cuff she kept hiding behind her notepad. Clara had worked at Luca's for 7 months. She had a 4-year-old daughter named Lily, a vanished ex named Derek, $63,000 in NICU debt, a one in exactly zero safety net. She was 2 months behind on rent. Her car was dying. She hadn't bought herself new shoes in 11 months. Every dollar went to 3 things: Lily, rent, debt. There was no fourth category, no savings, no vacations, no margin for error. Now here's the detail that changes everything later in the story. Pay attention. 3 weeks ago, Clara noticed something about the boy who came in every Friday with the man at the corner table. The boy was polite, well-behaved, but whenever his father was distracted, a phone call, a conversation with one of the men who approached the table, the boy's face changed. The energy drained. He'd stare at his plate, push his food around. Sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, his lower lip trembled. Clara recognized that look, as she had seen it in the mirror 1,000 times. The look of someone lonely in a room full of people. So she started doing something small, something no one noticed. Every Friday, she folded a napkin into an animal shape and left it on the boy's bread plate before he arrived. A swan, a rabbit, a little elephant. She'd tuck a note underneath, a smiley face, or "You're awesome," in purple crayon borrowed from Lily's art box. She never expected anything. She just knew what it felt like to be a small person in a big and different world. She had no idea the boy collected every single one. She had no idea he kept them in a shoebox under his bed. And she had no idea he'd been telling his father about the secret friend who left him animals every Friday. Remember that. It matters. Tonight, Clara approached the table as always. Good evening. Welcome back. Can I start you with drinks?" Marco spotted something on his bread plate and gasped. "Papa, look, it's a giraffe tonight." He held up a napkin folded into a long-necked giraffe. A note was tucked underneath. A purple smiley face with, "Friday is the best day because you're here." Dominic looked at the giraffe. He looked at the note. His brow furrowed. He glanced at Clara, but she'd already turned away toward the bar, her face betraying nothing. He would find out the truth soon enough. And when he did, it would break the last wall he had standing. At table 9, 15 feet from Dominic's corner, sat a man named Richard Holbrook, 44, hedge fund manager from Greenwich. Ruddy face, receding hairline, $10,000 watch, and the permanent expression of a man who believed the world existed to serve him. He was on his 4th martini. He had crossed from tipsy to belligerent 45 minutes ago. He snapped his fingers for service. He complained the food was overpriced. He leered. He had told Clara earlier that she should smile more because this job doesn't exactly require a PhD. Clara had said nothing. She'd smiled. She'd refilled his glass. Because that's what you do when you have a 4-year-old and 63,000 reasons you can't lose this job. At 8:47 p.m., Richard lurched out of his seat. His hip caught the table. His martini shattered. He didn't notice. He'd spotted Marco on the floor, running a toy car along the hardwood. Richard's expensive loafer caught on the boy's leg. He staggered. "What the hell is this?" His voice cracked across the room. "Who lets their kid crawl around on the floor? This isn't a daycare." Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Marco looked up, wide-eyed. His toy car froze in his hand. Dominic's hand stopped mid-reach for his water. His eyes locked onto Richard like targeting lasers. At the door, Sal's hand slipped beneath his jacket. Richard didn't notice. He leaned down into the boy's face. "Are you deaf, kid? Move!" Then he grabbed Marco's arm and yanked him off the ground. Rough, careless, cruel. Marco cried out, a sharp, high-pitched sound that cut the silence like broken glass. What happened in the next 3 seconds changed everything. Dominic rose, slow, deliberate. His face went blank. And when Dominic Valente's face went blank, it meant he had already decided what was going to happen. But before he was fully standing, before Sal could cross the room, before any of the 12 armed men could react, Clara moved. She didn't think. She heard a child scream, and the part of her brain that was a mother before anything else took over like a reflex. The tray hit the nearest table. She stepped between Richard and Marco. She reached back, guided the boy behind her, and planted her feet. A 120-pound wall built from maternal fury and nothing else. "Sir, let go of this child. Right now. Step back." Richard barked a laugh. "Excuse me? Do you know who I am? I'll buy this restaurant and fire you before dessert. I don't care who you are. You are drunk. You are scaring a child. Sit down and wait for a cab. You're done, sweetheart. I'll have your job. Your manager's job. Then sue me." Clara's voice dropped to something quiet and lethal. "But you will not touch this child again." Behind her, Marco had buried his face against her leg, gripping her apron, shaking. Richard's face went purple, humiliated by a waitress, in front of everyone. He grabbed a wine glass from the table and hurled it at the wall behind Clara's head. It exploded. Crystal shards rained down. A piece sliced her cheek, a bright red line just below her left eye. Blood welled immediately. She flinched. Her eyes squeezed shut for 1 second. Then she opened them, and she did not move. She stood there bleeding and shaking, and she did not move 1 inch. She kept her body between the drunk and the boy, and her eyes said, "You will have to go through me." She crouched down, scooped Marco into her arms, and her voice transformed, soft as sunlight. "Hey, buddy, you're okay. I promise. I've got you. Nothing bad is going to happen." She held him the way she held Lily during thunderstorms, tight, unshakable, like the world could collapse and this circle of her arms would be the last thing standing. Marco pressed his tear-soaked face into her neck. His small voice hiccuped. You're the giraffe lady." Clara's breath caught. "Yeah, buddy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm the giraffe lady." She looked up. Dominic Valente was standing directly behind Richard, silent, still, face empty of everything except intent, and he had heard every word. Now, before I tell you what Dominic did next, if you're still here, it means this story has you. I love that. Hit that like button right now. 1 second. It helps more than you know. Now let's keep going, because this is where it gets intense. You're the giraffe lady. Those 4 words hit Dominic Valente harder than any bullet ever had. For 3 weeks, Marco had been telling him about the secret friend. Every Friday, the boy brought home a napkin animal like it was sacred. A swan, a rabbit, a little elephant, each with a note, "You're awesome," or "You matter," in purple crayon. Dominic had tried to find out who was doing it. He asked Giancarlo. He had Sal check the cameras. Nothing. The person was invisible, and now he was staring at the ghost, a waitress with a cut on her face and his son in her arms. A woman who had been making his boy smile for weeks, not for money, not for access, simply because she noticed a lonely child. Richard was still ranting. "Never work in this city again. I'll make sure." "Turn around." 2 words, low, quiet, like a blade being drawn. Richard spun, stumbled, and found himself staring into the face of Dominic Valente. Whatever courage the martinis had provided evaporated instantly. Richard didn't know Dominic by name, but he recognized the look, something at the top of the food chain that didn't need to chase because it had already cornered its prey. "That boy you just grabbed," Dominic whispered. "That's my son." Every drop of blood left Richard's face. "And that woman, the one you threw a glass at, the one bleeding from her face because she did what 12 of my trained men couldn't do fast enough. She protected my child." He took a step forward. Richard stumbled back. "I watched you all evening, Richard." The use of his first name sent a visible shudder through the man. "I watched you harass my staff. I watched you drink yourself into a disgrace. And I decided you weren't worth my time." Another step forward, another step back. "Then you touched my son. You made a 6-year-old boy scream. And a waitress who has never met me, who doesn't know who I am, who has every reason to walk away, threw herself between you and my child without 1 second of hesitation." Dominic leaned in. His mouth was inches from Richard's ear. The rest of the restaurant couldn't hear what he said, but they saw the effect. Richard's knees buckled. His face went gray. His hands shook uncontrollably. A dark stain appeared at the front of his $1,000 trousers. When Dominic pulled back, he straightened his cuffs calmly. "Sal." "Boss." "Escort Mr. Holbrook to his vehicle, and then make sure he understands that he is no longer welcome in my restaurant, my city, my state, or any establishment that values its relationship with me." 2 men took Richard by the arms and walked him toward the back exit. He didn't resist. He had the hollow gait of a man whose entire world had just collapsed. Within 3 weeks, Richard's fund would lose its largest investors. Within 2 months, his club memberships were revoked. Within 6 months, he relocated to Florida. A quieter, humbler man who had learned that cruelty has a price, and sometimes that price is everything. But Dominic didn't care about Richard Holbrook anymore. He was already gone from his mind. Because Dominic was looking at Clara. Clara was looking at him, and his son was between them, clinging to the giraffe lady like she was the safest place on earth. The restaurant exhaled. Clara sat with Marco in her lap. He wouldn't let go. Dominic sat across from her. He studied the cut on her cheek, the blood on her shirt, the worn shoes. Then he said it. "You're the one who's been making the napkin animals." Clara flushed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overstep. I just noticed he seemed lonely sometimes. And I have a daughter his age, and I thought." 3 weeks. Dominic's voice was low, rough. "My son has been collecting your napkin animals in a shoebox under his bed. He calls you his secret friend. I had my people looking for whoever was doing this." Clara tensed. She thought she was in trouble. Dominic reached across and turned over one of the napkins. It read, "You matter," in purple crayon. "Since his mother died," he said, and for the first time his voice cracked, a hairline fracture in concrete. Marco has not smiled on a Friday night, not once in 2 years. Friday was their night. Elena took him for ice cream every Friday. When she died, Fridays became the day he cried the most. He paused, swallowed. 3 weeks ago, that changed. He started looking forward to Fridays. He started saying, well, Papa, can we go to Luca's? I want to see what my secret friend made me. And I didn't know who to thank. I didn't know who was giving my son his Fridays back. He looked at her. Behind the power, behind the reputation, behind the face that had terrified Richard into incontinence, she saw a grieving, exhausted, grateful father. It was you, Dominic said. The whole time. Clara's eyes filled. I didn't know about his mom. I know what it feels like to eat dinner and feel invisible. I wanted him to feel seen. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Dominic personally cleaned the cut on Clara's cheek. His hands, capable of terrible things, were astonishingly gentle. He applied a butterfly bandage with the care of someone who had dressed far worse wounds. You didn't have to do that, Clara said. You keep saying that. You didn't have to make napkin animals. You didn't have to take glass to the face. You didn't have to shield a boy you've never met. And yet, he asked how bad things were financially. She deflected. He asked again. Not with pity, but with the quiet firmness of someone who refused to accept a polite lie. Something broke in her. The words poured out. 63,000 in debt. 2 months behind on rent. Double shifts. Midnight daycare. A dying car. No new shoes in a year. Hon, but Lily is fed, she said, wiping her eyes. She's safe. She's healthy. And I show up every day. That's what I've got. Dominic listened without interrupting. Then he said, I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who want something. Every smile is calculated. Every handshake has a price. That is my world. He leaned forward. And then there's you. You fold napkin giraffes for a lonely boy you've never spoken to. You take glass to the face for a child you don't know. Not for money, not for power, because it's right. He placed a business card on the table. Plain cream stock, a name and a number. Monday morning, call this number. Ask for Angela DeLuca. She runs my foundation. She's going to offer you a position, executive assistant, salary, benefits, full medical for you and your daughter. This is not charity, Clara. This is me hiring the only person in the city who has proven, without being asked, that she can be trusted with what matters most to me. I can't. Your medical debt will be cleared by end of week. Your daughter's daycare is handled. Angela is expecting your call. Why? Clara whispered. You don't owe me anything. Dominic looked at Marco, asleep in her arms. 2 years ago, I lost the only person who ever protected my son the way you did tonight. His mother. He paused. When he spoke again, she had to lean in to hear. Elena used to fold napkin animals for him, too. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. The tears broke free. You didn't know that. But when Marco called you the giraffe lady and held on to you like you were the safest place in the world, I saw something I thought I'd never see again. My son choosing someone, not because of money or power, because of kindness. He wrote a second number on the card. Personal, if you or your daughter ever need anything, day or night, no conditions. Clara held the card against her chest with one hand and his sleeping son with the other, and she cried quietly in the corner of a restaurant she had walked into 7 months ago as a nobody and was walking out of tonight as something else entirely. 12 months later, Clara Reese was the executive assistant at the Valenti Foundation. Not a favor. She earned it. Within 90 days, Angela told Dominic that Clara was the most hardworking person she'd ever managed. He just nodded. He'd already known. Lily was in one of Manhattan's best preschools, thriving, reading above her level, laughing freely. Clara's debt was gone. New apartment in Brooklyn Heights, new car, new shoes, a savings account, small but it existed, a fourth bucket finally. But some things hadn't changed. She still showed up early, still stayed late, still wore the ponytail, and every Friday she and Lily had dinner at Luca's, at the corner table, because every Friday Dominic and Marco were there. Marco would sprint across the restaurant the moment Clara walked in. "What did you make me this time?" And Clara would pull a napkin animal from her purse, more elaborate now, made at home, tutorials watched at midnight after Lily fell asleep. Then Marco would take Lily's hand, and the two of them, the Mafia boss's son and the waitress's daughter, would sit side by side with crayons arguing over the green one, drawing pictures that made no logical sense but were somehow perfect. One Friday evening, and as the children fought over dessert, Clara said something she'd been carrying for months. "That night, with Richard, I almost didn't step in." Dominic tilted his head. "For 1 second, I thought about Lily. What happens if I get fired? What if he hurts me? What if I lose everything?" "But you didn't walk away." "No, because I thought about Lily again. And I thought, if she were the one being grabbed by a stranger, I would pray for someone to step in. So I became the answer to a prayer I didn't even know anyone was praying." Dominic was quiet. He watched Marco showing Lily how to draw a rocket. Lily was showing Marco how to draw a triceratops. Between them, they'd created a crayon picture of a triceratops riding a rocket through outer space. They were extremely proud. "Elena used to say something," Dominic said, his voice careful the way it always was when he spoke about her. "She said God doesn't always send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends them with aprons and purple crayons." Clara laughed, a wet, teary, surprised sound. "She did not say that." "No," Dominic admitted. And then something extraordinary happened. Something Sal, 3 tables away, would later swear he imagined. Something Giancarlo would tell his wife about in disbelief. Dominic Valenti smiled. Not a polite smile, not a calculated one. A real, unguarded, human smile, the kind that cracks open the chest and lets light into places that have been dark for a very long time. "She didn't say that," he repeated, "but she would have. If she'd met you, Clara, she would have said exactly that." "Papa, Clara, look!" Marco held up his drawing. "It's a triceratops in space." "That's a triceratops?" Dominic squinted. "It looks like a potato with horns." "That's what a triceratops is," Lily announced as if this were common knowledge. Clara burst out laughing. Marco burst out laughing. Even Dominic, the most feared man on the eastern seaboard, whose silence could empty a room, pressed his hand to his mouth and laughed. And in that corner, at a table that used to seat a man and his loneliness, there was something new, something that couldn't be bought or negotiated into existence. A family, not by blood, not by law, by choice, the most powerful kind there is. And that is the story of how a waitress with $9 an hour courage and a pocket full of purple crayons earned the loyalty of the most dangerous man in New York City. She didn't do it for money. She didn't do it because she knew who he was. She did it because she folds napkin giraffes for lonely children and stands between monsters and innocence without being asked. In a world full of people who look the other way, she looked directly at the problem and said, "Not on my watch." That made her the most powerful person in the room. Now I want to hear from you. 2 questions. Drop your answers in the comments. Number 1, if you were in Clara's shoes, broke, exhausted, one mistake from losing everything, Would you have stepped in? Number 2. What hit you harder? The moment she shielded Marco from the glass, or the moment Dominic realized she was the secret friend making his son smile for weeks? I read every single comment. Every one. If this story moved you, hit that like button. If you're new, subscribe and tap the bell. I drop stories like this every week, and the next one hits even harder. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying to the end. I'll see you in the next one.